All right, we're going to get going. Um, for those I haven't had an opportunity to meet, my name is Laurie Cooper Stoll. I am the director of the University Senate Office. I want to thank you for being with us this afternoon, and I'm gonna turn it over to Perry Leo.
Hi, everybody. My name's Perry Leo. I am the chair of the Faculty Consultative Committee and the Senate Consultative Committee for this academic year. I'm looking forward to working with everybody during this year. As you can probably guess from reading the newspapers, and if anybody reads newspapers anymore, from looking at your social media sites, it's going to be a busy and active year in academics, and so there's going to be a lot on the table for the committees, for the full Senate. And so, I think we're going to have a busy and hopefully productive year. I appreciate everybody being here. I think not only what we decide is important, but how we decide it. People are looking at us these days. And so I hope that the Senate can set a model for how governance bodies can behave in this day and age. So, like I said, I'm looking forward to working with everybody, and enjoy your hour and a half with Amber, Laurie, and the Senate staff. And so I'll turn it back to them. Thank you.
Great. And I'm going to start by inviting our parliamentarian, Nancy Sims, just to say a few words and let you know a little bit about her role and stuff. And after that, I will launch into the presentation.
Hi. Just as an aside, the AI notes tool that was somebody turned on probably shouldn't be turned on because there are official records of these meetings and you can keep your own notes, but people shouldn't be using those tools without clearing them centrally, or I don't know. It hasn't come up before. But yeah, okay. Sorry. I got distracted by that. I'm also like, yeah. Hi, I'm the parliamentarian. This is my third year in the job. Parliamentarian's job is to try to have a sense of how the rules work. The rules here are very, very complicated, and so I got roped into this after 6 years as a PNA senator. And then during part of that time, I was a senator from the PNA Senate to the University Senate. Um, I was gonna stop, but they tend to like to have a lawyer in this position, and the previous person decided they needed to be done with parliamentary stuff, and I am a lawyer, so people asked me to do that. My day job at the university, in the university libraries, is working on copyright and scholarly publishing issues. And as an aside, if any of you are dealing with federal funding, public access policies, and publication issues, that's my job. Come talk to me in my day job. Um, so in this context, I am here to be an informational resource primarily. I don't actually make final decisions about how we interpret our rules. We do follow Robert's rules, which is a whole big developed process for running large meetings with lots of people in them. If you are somebody who came up through Future Farmers of America or some other system that used Roberts heavily, you probably know them better than I do. I've been working hard to try to wrap my head around them, but it's a lot. We also have local governing documents, and that's a really important thing to know because we do not actually do what Roberts does in lots of situations because we have local constitution, bylaw, and rules, lots of things to cross-reference in lots of situations. I agreed to take the parliamentarian job partly because I had been so frustrated by parliamentary procedure in local political meetings. Having been involved from this end of things, I have a little bit more appreciation for why the rules are as complex as they are, but they're not very straightforward in any context. So we are all, speaking for myself, Senate staff, and anybody who's involved in running the meetings, we are all doing our best to try to make the rules work the best we can. When things come up in the moment, we sometimes have to make a judgment call in the moment. And the final determination on how the rules work is whoever is chairing the meeting. That is the final call. There are rules in the rules for questioning the chair's determinations, if you ever want to talk about that. Yeah, in previous years, I've mostly just been available during meetings. We're gonna try something a little bit different this year, which is I'm gonna try to have office hours. Um, my current thought is that they should maybe be before Senate meetings. So I'm gonna set one up before the first Senate meeting. But I know people also often have questions after Senate meetings to kind of go, what happened? So, if any of you have thoughts about when would be the best time to have office hours, shortly before or shortly after a Senate meeting, feel free to contact me directly. I'm NASIMS, SIMS, at umn.edu. Otherwise, let's all try to work together and make it work as smoothly as possible, despite it all being so complex. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. So whoever's helping me with the slides, I think Dina, if you want to pull them up. We had got a last minute pinch hitting right now because our other staff members held up in another meeting. So I think,
Donovan's
I
gonna
think
do
it's
it.
you.
Donovan's gonna do it.
Okay, cool.
I just arrived just in time, so let me pull up the slides here and then I'll start sharing my screen.
Excellent. Thank you, Donovan. It's a team effort.
Sure is.
Okay, I found your slides. Let's do a slideshow and I'll share my screen. Can everyone see that?
I can.
Okay, good.
All right, excellent. Thank you. So you can go ahead to the next slide, Donovan. I'm just gonna launch in a little bit. So we hope that this orientation will help members understand where they fit into the big picture. As you can see, there's a lot going on in the Senate structure, and I know that sometimes it's confusing. So I'm going to do my best to demystify it a little bit. And for those of you who have been through this before and who are no longer mystified, just bear with me, and we'll just kind of make sure everyone has the same baseline understanding at least. So shared governance, just to start with a little bit of an introduction, is based on the core idea that administrators, faculty, staff, and students all have important roles to play in setting university policy and making key decisions. It also gives voice, although not necessarily ultimate authority, to all constituencies, helping those who do make them do so more wisely. This large Senate structure here that you see pictured is the mechanism through which we do that, as you can imagine, since there are a lot of parts to it. Sometimes things take a long time. That's kind of what we talk about a lot about benefits of shared governance, but one of the challenges with it is that it does take time. Things don't necessarily happen quickly in the shared governance model, and that's a little bit by design. But also just a matter of look at how many people are involved. So I'll talk a little bit now about the overall structure of University Senate governance, the University Senate governance system. The University Senate, which you are all members of, is the umbrella body, and it comprises representatives from all the other senates, the other 4 senates. So the faculty, student, P&A, and civil service senates. And those are all represented by the gold circles. It's important to note, though, that the other senates don't report to the University Senate. All 5 senates have direct lines to the administration and can act as independent bodies. The University Senate and the Faculty Senate meet about 6 times a year, and each of the constituent senates also hold separate meetings. Each senate also has a consultative committee. Those are represented by the white circles on your screen. So the P&A consultative committee, the faculty consultative committee, etc. And the consultative committees are charged with steering and executive duties for the senates, including setting agendas, serving as a deliberative body of the Senate, and if needed, acting on behalf of the Senate. We'll talk about their role in a little bit more detail a little bit later on. All the other committees that are not consultative committees report up to one of the senates or sometimes more than one of the senates through their consultative committee. So you'll see, for example, the Educational Policy Committee in the left box on the lower corner reports up mainly through the Faculty Senate because the faculty are the people who are charged to be in control of the curriculum and and educational matters. So educational policy reports mainly to the Faculty Senate, but also has a secondary reporting line to both the University Senate and Student Senate, as education being kind of one of the main points of the university. It really affects everybody who is part of the university community. All right. So next slide, Donovan. I am going to talk a little bit about the Senate officers and leadership. So as you may or may not know, those of you who are new, the president of the university is chair of the university and faculty senates. This is somewhat unique. We are definitely in the vast minority, if not the only one of our peers where the president is the chair of those bodies. So like other things, that presents some benefits and challenges. But one of the main benefits is that the president attends most meetings. Sometimes she has conflicts, but typically she's there chairing the meeting, giving a report, and that gives our senators a lot more access to the president than senators do at other institutions. Next, we have Professor Jerry Cohen from the College of Food, Agriculture, and Natural Resource Sciences, who's the vice chair of the University and Faculty Senates. In this role, he's a member of both the Senate and Faculty Consultative Committees, and he also is tasked with chairing the University and Faculty Senate when the president is unable to do so, or sometimes there's like a situation where it would be awkward for her to chair. So that's when Jerry will step in. And then we have Professor Cliff Steer from the medical school, who will serve as our clerk, helping with keeping time and recording votes, etc. And Nancy Sims, who you just heard from, is the parliamentarian. Professors Perry Leo of the College of Science and Engineering, who you heard from earlier, and Tim Johnson from the College of Liberal Arts are the chair and vice chair, respectively, of the Senate and Faculty Consultative Committees. In their roles as leadership of the steering committees of the Senates, they're also part of the leadership team. And then you also have me, and we're kind of the people who do the behind the scenes work to make the Senate meetings run. So next I'll talk about the composition of the Senate. So the Faculty Senate, when all seats are filled, has 166 members, plus the president. The University Senate includes all members of the Faculty Senate, all members of the Student Senate, which is 60 students, and 25 members each, elected from the P&A and Civil Service Senates. Again, when all seats are filled. The provosts, vice provosts, vice presidents, chancellors, deans, university librarian, and committee chairs are ex officio members of the Senate. So this means they have speaking rights, but not voting rights at Senate meetings. I'll go on now to consultative committees and mention, as I mentioned earlier, I'll go into a little bit more depth about what their role and purpose is, as well as their membership. So the Faculty Consultative Committee, or FCC, is composed of 9 members elected by the Twin Cities faculty, and 1 each elected by the faculties at Morris and Rochester and the Pharmacy and Medical School on the Duluth campus. The Crookston and the rest of the Duluth campus, because their faculties are unionized, are not members of the Senates. However, we do have, this is a little bit of an aside, I'm going on a tangent, but we do have representatives from those other campuses in our other constituencies, so they're not completely left out. The chair and vice chair of the FCC are elected from among the membership of the FCC, including the ex officio members, who are the chairs of AF&T, so Academic Freedom and Tenure, the Faculty Affairs Committee, the Educational Policy Committee, the Research Committee, Faculty Advisory Committee for the Health Sciences, and the Finance and Planning Committee. The SCC, the Senate Consultative Committee, is composed of no more than 12 of the voting faculty members of the FCC. So there's a little bit of a flow chart to figure out who those 12 are sometimes. But the idea is not to upset the balance and have way more faculty than the rest of the constituents on SCC. So the chair and the chair-elect of the P&A Senates are members of the SCC as well as the Student Senate Chair and 6 additional students elected from the Student Senate Consultative Committee. And the chair of the Educational Policies and Educational Policy and Finance and Planning committees are non-voting ex officio on the SCC in addition to the FCC. So the consultative committees have 3 major roles: consulting, steering, and executive. The consultative role is more outward-facing and basically involves meeting with administrators to discuss and advise on policies and issues of concern and liaising between the Senate and the administration. The steering and executive roles overlap a little and are related to the functioning of the Senate and committees. In these roles, consultative committees are charged with a variety of tasks, including but not limited to overseeing the work of the committees, receiving recommendations of any constituent who wishes to present a proposal to the Senate, and to refer or act upon such recommendations as appropriate, putting together Senate agendas and dockets, serving as a deliberative body of the Senate on all major items it deems necessary and appropriate, reporting regularly on any matters which its judgment should be brought to the attention of the university at large, or specifically to the Senate for consideration, and disposing of business which appears not to be germane to the purposes of the Senate. As I mentioned before, the consultative committees can, under certain circumstances, act on behalf of the Senates. Such actions are always reported to the Senate at its next regular meeting, and the Senate does have the option to overrule those decisions, but they tend to happen over the summer, or if there's something at the very end of the year, or just at a time when the full body can't reasonably be called. Okay, next slide, Donovan. So shared governance at the U of M, this is gonna get a little more out of the weeds and into the philosophy at this point for a while. A well-functioning shared governance structure relies on trust and productive relationships between governance participants, the administration, and the broader university community. If any of those kind of parts don't trust each other, it becomes more difficult. The University Senate Office emphasizes collaboration and consultation between these groups, as well as collaboration within the governance structure, such as between senates and committees and with the Senate Office. The University Senate governance includes, as I mentioned before, non-unionized faculty, staff, and students from all 5 campuses and extension in the senates and committees. So we have people participating in Senate meetings from all over the state, not just the 5 campus areas. And we recognize diversity as a strength and strive for committees that reflect the diversity of the university community. University Senate governance is advisory to the administration. This means that the power of shared governance mainly lies in its ability to influence. And so again, building those relationships and that trust is really important. Next slide. So Senate responsibilities, consistent with actions and policies of the Board of Regents, the Senates have, quote, general legislative authority over all general matters that affect the university as a whole, end quote. What does that even mean? Well, it's very vague and very general and kind of that way on purpose, which allows the Senate to basically talk about whatever it wants and give it advice on whatever it wants, generally limited to things that affect the university as a whole or more than one college and campus. Tend not to delve into things that are, only affect one college. It is important to remember that this authority does exist within the context of powers delegated by the Board of Regents. So our very first constitution that came out in 1912 starts with, I can even read the right words, the control of the educational policy and administrative affairs of the university, including the government of the student body, is vested, subject to the Board of Regents, in the President, the University Senate, and the several college faculties. So the Constitution has changed a little bit between now and then, but that kind of basic premise remains. The Faculty Senate's authority includes responsibility for educational policy and research policies, Um, and there are a number of policies that have to be brought to the Senate for
I've
approval.
had an experience in the past where that went poorly. But also I did a quick Google search and everything I found.
Sorry. Okay, so as mentioned earlier, most recommendations that the Senate make are advisory, and the administration is not required to follow them. Exceptions are that the Faculty Senate must approve educational policies and decisions related to the curriculum, as some of you may remember from last year, as well as changes to the tenure policy. Again, that's not to say some people hear that advisory and kind of feel a little deflated, which is understandable, but it's really not to say that the Senates don't have power, because there's incredible power in influence in such a large body. And so when you work within the system the correct way, it really does work well. We're known to have a strong and robust governance system here at the University of Minnesota, and that's one of the reasons why. So, all right. So the Senates are large bodies. They meet relatively infrequently. So the Senates are often kind of the last stop for initiatives and actions that come through, meaning that they do provide input and approve. But they often don't get into like the real kind of like detail nitty-gritty of policy changes, initiatives, and legislative action. This type of work is generally accomplished in the committees. Next slide. So this slide talks about how committees and the Senate can provide input and affect change. The best and primary way is, and honestly, the way that often flies under the radar, is simply through advising and making recommendations. This often happens through consultation or informal dialogue at committee meetings or Senate meetings, but as I mentioned, often more committee meetings because they're a little bit more nimble bodies in terms of having more meetings, fewer members, and people can really dig into stuff. But like I said, those things often get overlooked because there really isn't any fanfare. There isn't really even any documentation except for the minutes of committee meetings. But all committees include ex officio members who are administrators relative to those the topic of the committee or the charge of the committee. And so either with those ex officio members or with guests who come to the committee to seek input or make presentations, there's a lot of ideas that get floated and just implemented because they're good ideas, they're feasible, they're not going to take a lot of change or new infrastructure or anything to implement. And that's great. Another way that governance bodies have influence is through policy consultation. Policies, as I'm sure many of you know, undergo comprehensive review on a regular cycle of about 4 years. And many committees have established and documented roles to play in that review cycle. These requirements are codified in the Senate Review Matrix, which is housed on the Policy Program's website and also linked from the resources section of the University Senate Office website. For example, I talked about educational policies earlier. Not surprisingly, those all go to the Educational Policy Committee. Typically after that to the Faculty Consultative Committee and the Faculty Senate for approval. Likewise, policies on discrimination, equity and access, sexual misconduct, must be reviewed by the Equity, Access, and Diversity Committee. Disability-related policies have to go to the Disabilities Issues Committee, etc. So these bodies are also consulted whenever policies undergo major revisions outside of the normal review cycle, but they do have that regular review every 4-ish years. Turning now to what we call legislative action, and this tends to be mostly things that come through committees. It's not typically initiated in Senate just because the Senate is such a large body, so you'll often see these things after they've been kind of consulted around. Then there's 3 different types of legislative actions that committees take to make its opinions heard in a more formal manner. The 3 types are a letter, a statement, and a resolution. These actions will end up at the appropriate Senate either for information or for a vote. Technically, Senates can also make use of these actions, but again, it's much more common to see them come through a committee. And this is basically just so they can benefit from the detailed discussion and consultation that committee work affords. And they also will go through multiple committees as well to broaden the consultation. If individual senators want to bring such an action, there's absolutely an avenue for doing that. We suggest that the best way is to approach a committee to partner with, but if nothing else, you may come to us, the University Senate office, and we will help guide through that process. There is a form that we ask people to submit. It's called a legislative action initiation form. And it asks people to fill out kind of their goals, what if anything has already been, attempted? Has there been conversation? Has there been, you know, meetings with other people, other committees about the issue, et cetera? And to kind of outline their goals and plans so that we can help guide them through the process. As Nancy likes to say, I love this phrase, so I keep quoting it, Nancy. Our governing documents, our constitution, bylaws, and rules are somewhat homegrown. So they may not be what you're used to if you've served on other boards. They are based on Robert's rules, but there are places where they deviate, sometimes significantly. And you really kind of need a guide to understand how they work. And so that's what we are here for. And we are, invested in governance being as successful as possible. So we're, happy to help guide people through that process. Next slide. All right. Laurie, I think this is going to be you.
I think you're right, Amber.
Okay.
All right, thanks. So along the lines of what Amber just shared about the vested interest that all of us have in making sure that shared governance runs as effectively as possible, I'm just going to speak for a few moments about what are some criteria we have found that have led to some great outcomes, some successful legislative actions over the years. Donovan, I'm going to have you go to the next slide, please. And so while none of us in the Senate office have a crystal ball or can predict whether or not a particular legislative action will have support. Fortunately, the benefit of having folks in the Senate office who have some historical knowledge and context have allowed us to identify some things that seem to not work well and some things that seem to work really well. And so ultimately, when we're talking about legislative actions that are successful, one way we might gauge that degree of success is whether or not the recommendations that the Senate may be asking for are either met or a compromise of some kind is brokered. I'm going to have you go to the next slide, Donovan, please. One of the things that we have found among those that have not been successful is that there are three prime reasons for that. And the first one, Amber has already stated a few times, and that is there was not enough consultation. And this is particularly important for a couple reasons. One, extensive consultation, while on the one hand may make some assume, well, this is what makes shared governance run a little bit slower or a little bit more clunky. Ultimately, the benefit of that is found in an opportunity to be able to talk with others, create buy-in, answer questions that folks may have about the recommendations that you're trying to bring forward. And so the consultation process is so important for increasing the chances that when legislative action comes for a vote, that people feel like they're informed, they know what they're voting on, and they know what the consequences of that are. Two, another stumbling block to successful legislative actions can be asking for actions that are not practical or possible. And so again, the Senate office can be a resource along with other governance leaders, ex officios in their capacity as well, to help provide context, information on protocol, and also provide, again, some guidance on how to navigate through some of these systems. And then 3, ignoring guidance. And so this, I think, goes hand in hand again with seeking out consultation. So being open to understanding that folks who hold a different vantage point in the university may have access to information that we may not have, and that can fill in important gaps. And again, hopefully lead us to creating something that is more successful as it navigates through shared governance. So speaking of that, how can we increase the chances of being successful? Well, Donovan, to the next slide. Thank you. And actually, Donovan, you can go ahead to the next slide as well. The first thing I want to bring up is that legislative action is not always the best answer for the solution that you're seeking. Talking to folks oftentimes is one of the, while it may seem like fairly simple, we've actually found that engaging in dialogue around a number of these issues has led to important changes without having to bring forward legislative action. It also goes a long way towards building good working relationships with others as well. So the first question we will oftentimes have is, what has been discussed about this thus far? And next slide, please. Anytime legislative action is going to be pursued, I want to reiterate what Amber said about the first step being reaching out to our office. And for all the reasons that Amber outlined, whether that's being able to help navigate through rules, bylaws, or procedures that we may have that may differ from other bodies that you may be familiar with, but then also to make sure that we're able to provide some insight on what are some governing groups that it would be important to consult with, to meet with, and help you make some of those connections and contacts to be able to do that. Next slide, please. So the final piece I'm going to talk about before turning it back over then are what are the 4 keys that to effective governance that we've seen. So when we look at what are the resolutions, what are the letters that have led to really positive outcomes, there are some commonalities that we have found among them. The first one is, again, build good working relationships with your senators, with community and campus stakeholders, with governing leaders, with the administration, with the Senate office. It is super important because the bottom line is we have to work together in order to bring about effective change. And so that is one of the important keys. Secondly, again, consult. The more, the better. We have found more consultation oftentimes provides an opportunity for folks and committees who bring that forward to have been able to address questions that have come up along the way in the process. 3, listen to ex officios, your governance leaders, Senate office, for the reason that I mentioned earlier, to provide a more complete picture of a particular issue. Again, connect you with others who might have some insights that would be helpful for you in crafting that legislative action, and help you to be more strategic, which is the 4th key. Be strategic, be pragmatic. Think about, again, what your long-term goals are, what the ultimate result is that you want to work towards. In addition, keep in mind that compromise oftentimes leads to stronger, more thoughtful policy, and certainly can enable action, prevent gridlock. And so I will end there, Amber, and I will send that back over to you for now.
Excellent. Thank you. So I'm going to talk about a few examples of really successful legislative action. So the first one is an example of kind of a letter. It was actually just an email, but essentially the same thing. And this is involving the substance use resources in the drug-free campus emails that we all get from OHR. I think once a semester, they used to just say like, remember, this is a drug-free campus and don't do drugs. Now they have a link to resources for people who are struggling with substance misuse issues, and that was just a matter of, that email came out. We had a disabilities issues committee meeting shortly thereafter, and people were like, boy, it's like seems kind of harsh, like maybe it would be better if we could put some resources in there for people who need them. And the committee was like, yeah, that's a good idea. And so the committee chair emailed Vice President Horstman, and voila, the text is now in there. So that was a really easy action that maybe it doesn't have a huge impact, but I do think it made it better, and everyone just worked together and it was lovely. A more recent action is the Washington Avenue Bridge funding statement. This was a statement from the Senate Consultative Committee. It first started kind of with the Student Senate Consultative Committee because they had an advocacy group visit them and talk about the Washington Avenue Bridge and concerns about jumping. And they wanted to know, the Student Senate Consultative Committee wanted to know what could governance do to support that effort. And so the Senate Consultative Committee decided, once we saw that there was a budget ask from the university to the state legislator specifically for funding for that bridge, to make that adjustment with the physical barrier. The SCC said, great, this is something the university is already asking for. We can use our voice to support that request. And so they wrote a statement and we gave it to like the legislative affairs folks and government affairs, government relations to distribute to the state legislator. And as I think many of you know, we did receive funding to add a physical barrier to the pedestrian area of the Washington Avenue Bridge. Now, certainly that wasn't the only effort that went into that. I won't go so far as to attribute it solely to governance action or to this one statement, but I certainly think that it probably helped, and especially given the rest of the budget success or lack thereof. Unfortunately, that occurred at the state legislature. I think this, definitely played a part. And then finally, a resolution. Some of you may have been around. This was, I don't know, 2018, something like that. So it was a while, but some of you may remember that there was a resolution that came through the Senate, and this was about a year's worth of consultation with other committees, with administrators, with different student groups and whatnot, to ask the administration to create and require a training on how to best support students with disabilities. And it came on the heels of the sexual misconduct training, or preventing sexual misconduct training. And people on the committee were really like, you know what, we really need people to have a baseline understanding of how to work with students with disabilities, what accommodation letters mean, and what, faculty's really their obligation is under the ADA and whatnot. And we think the time is right for the training. So it took quite a bit of consultation. Not everyone was on board at first, and probably not everyone was on board to end up either, but the committee engaged in enough consultation and compromise and change management, really explaining to a lot of people through the course of the consultations why they thought this was important and would be helpful. And by the time it got to the Senate, where it passed, not unanimously, but pretty overwhelmingly, people were emailing us asking, like, when is this training going to come out? Because I really want it to help me with my work. So that was a good example of really what a successful resolution, taking an idea that, the administration needed some convincing too, to commit the funding and the resources to that. Some people needed the convincing that it really was an issue that was important enough to do a training on, but in the end, there was enough of a consensus that we considered it a big success. So that's a kind of a proud moment for governance. Next slide. I can't remember what's on it. Okay. A few resources. These are all on our website, usenate.umn.edu/resources. But just to give some examples that I already talked about, the legislative action initiation form. There's also some tips on how to write a statement, letter, or resolution with an eye towards like what makes it successful, like especially for a resolution, how do you write a resolution that gives it the best chance of getting passed in a Senate where everyone's going to have opinions on individual words and individual, tiny clauses and stuff. Best practices for effective consultation. This is something that goes both ways. So committees and people and senators consulting with the administration, and the administration consulting with governance bodies when they're bringing something through. The legislative action and policy tracker, which is linked from our homepage. It's also linked on the resources page. You can look there to see what all legislative actions are going through the system at the moment and what policies are under consultation. The Senate Office Data Sharing Protocol is also on our resources page, and the Administrative Policy Review Matrix, which I referenced earlier. And yes, thank you, Penny. A Robert's Rules cheat sheet is also there. Next slide. And I do have a slide, like kind of basic Robert's Rules overview next, but that is certainly probably a more helpful and complete resource that's on the website. So meeting logistics, probably some of this you've already seen because you've probably looked at your calendar, but just to go over a little bit what you can expect logistic-wise. So meetings are added to the Google Calendar. The docket for Senate meetings is linked into the calendar invite once it's sent out. And that's typically about a week before the meeting. That's what I strive for. Sometimes there's things beyond our control that you cannot get it out earlier, but that's my goal always, to get it out 1 week before the meeting. The process for sending an alternate is linked to every email that I send out with the docket. So there's a spreadsheet that you can fill out. That's just so I'm not trying to keep track of piecemeal emails and missing stuff. This way it's all in one place, and I can easily forward things to alternates and make sure that they get the meeting invites. Meeting protocols. So when we are online, we use Zoom polls. We are going to be implementing this year a Google Sheet for the speaking queue. And we'll go over that more at the first meeting. When on Zoom, we keep everyone muted by default and use the raise hand function, unmute and turn on video when you're recognized. When we are in person, we have been using Chime In for voting. So I'm sure lots of you have used that before in the classroom. And that's what we've been using for the kind of hybrid situation that we have in meetings that are primarily in person, but as we know, people are always need to be on Zoom for some reason, so we accommodate that. Meetings are open, meaning anyone can attend. Non-members can speak, but a senator needs to yield time, and obviously people who aren't members can't vote. Next slide. All right, so here's a very basic overview of parliamentary procedure. The chair facilitates the meeting, so typically the president will kind of be in charge of moving the agenda along, deciding when to move on from discussion, calling on people, whatnot. The parliamentarian advises on rules and procedures, and Senate meetings follow procedures laid out in its Constitution, bylaws, and rules, and Robert's Rules of Order, where the Constitution, bylaws, and rules don't specifically speak to things. It defaults to Robert's Rules. Motions are typically listed in the docket, and a quorum must be present for any vote. A quorum is 50% of the body plus one, so it's okay, well, I would say it's not hard to meet, but sometimes it has been hard to meet, so it shouldn't be hard to meet. Motions require a simple majority to pass, so simple majority of those present and voting unless otherwise noted. Notable exceptions to that are changes to the Constitution and bylaws, which have higher thresholds for approving amendments. Next slide. So in order to maximize meeting effectiveness, since we do meet, you know, relatively infrequently and usually have quite a lot of business to get through, we ask people to please read and reflect on materials in advance and come prepared for any votes. Again, that's one of the main reasons that I try to get things out a week in advance. I know that's still not a ton of time, but as much as you can to read over and think about things, just reflect on them before coming to vote. Speakers are limited to 2 minutes each time they're recognized, and that's including yielding time. So if you yield time to someone, that is considered your turn speaking. Senators are prioritized over non-senators, and those have not yet spoken on the topic at hand over those who have spoken. We do use the pro-con debate if there's a motion on the floor and if there's like something that we think is going to be a particularly sort of polarized discussion where we want to make sure people from both sides get a chance to speak. When we don't use pro-con debate, in the University Senate, we often alternate between constituencies. So, you know, have a faculty person speak and then PA and civil service and student as much as possible, you know, based on the people who have their hands up. Members have the right to make motions and raise points of order information, and we certainly want people to be able to make use of those things to keep the meeting running in the manner that it should. But sometimes we have encountered the situation where there's a limited time for discussion and someone makes a motion and it ends up taking all the time that we have for discussion. And so just a kind of a we urge you to consider that before making a motion, not asking people not to do it, but just think about the time allotted and whether it's the best use of the available time. Next slide. All right, here's a few rules of decorum. So as I kind of mentioned before, governance can be messy, complex. Reasonable people can disagree, and that's kind of the point of what we do. We really want everyone to be able to have their voice heard. But we're all vested in the, you know, the smooth and optimal functioning of the university as an institution. And so we like to tell people to keep in mind, just like we're all really on the same team. We all are trying to make the university a better place, and just to try to keep that in mind. Address all remarks through the chair, maintain focus on discussion topics, refrain from speaking adversely on prior actions of the body, and under no circumstances may a member attack or question the motives or character of another member. That is antithetical to the you know, the respect and the I guess respect is the best word that we should treat each other with as colleagues. And so I think that's that. Laurie, I will turn it back to you for a few moments.
Yeah, thanks, Amber. Just going to say a couple of quick things about the University Senate office, because while much of your interaction will probably be with Amber, you know, or myself, there are also other members of our team, including in this orientation right now, that are helping out. So want to share just a couple quick slides with you here. I want to start with the just mission statement of our office, Donovan. So, as you can read here, it is to facilitate the successful operation of the governance system, the University of Minnesota, by providing professional support and guidance to University Senate governance bodies and their constituent committees. There are 6 members of the as of this past Tuesday, there are 6 members of the team. We had a colleague who has moved on to a position outside the university. Donovan, if you could turn to the next slide. What I will share with you about how the work in our office gets done. Each of us who work with the shared governance portion of our office, because some of you may or may not know that the other side of our house is University Awards and Honors, but as far as the shared governance piece to it, those of us who work with shared governance have a portfolio, and that portfolio closely matches areas of expertise. And Amber is a valuable resource in our office, not only as a double alumna of the university, but also because she has 18 years working at the university. 8 of those have been in the Senate office. So Amber will be, you'll be in very good hands this year. Similarly, Jacqueline, if you, again, one of the most important things that governance bodies do is advise and consult on policies, and Jacqueline is our policy liaison, so you may have some interaction with her as well. Also an alumna of the U and been with the university for 17 years. 11 of those were in faculty affairs, so a lot of her portfolio includes bodies that work primarily in that area. Dina Barker does a lot of the work with committees when it comes to DEIB issues and has advanced training in doing that work. And our newest associate, Donovan Laura, thanks for running the slides today, comes to us originally from the residence life side of things, however, has extensive experience in both at the undergraduate and graduate level with student governance. And so a lot of the committees and the Senate that Donovan works with has to do with the student side of the house. Jessica Paulson knows everything. She has been in our office for about 22 years, been at the university for 25 years. So oftentimes questions or things that come through our office may get routed through Jessica. And then there's me, who is grateful to get to work with such a great team every day. My background is as a faculty member, an elected official, an executive director, and hopefully those experiences will continue to allow me to support the work that you're doing as effectively as I can. So you will probably see all of us from time to time, and it's just a good thing to have some names and faces there when you do. And Amber, I think that may be it for me. Other than just a brief overview, as you can see here, I will say, because I did the math on this last year, that our office facilitates over 250 meetings per year, and that only includes Senate and committee meetings. It does not include hearings, trainings, retreats, and so on. So please be patient, please be kind, with our team, and know that we have a lot on our plates and are down right now, a person as well. So thanks, Amber.
Sure thing. I think all we have left is Q&A. So Donovan, you want to, yep, okay. Just to confirm that I didn't miss something. And I'll start off because I got a question in the chat. That's a really good question. And so I thought I would answer it for everyone here. And the question was, if senators are selected for committees. So our structure is a little bit different from, say, the US Senate, where senators aren't required to serve on committees and committee members don't have to be members of the Senate. That said, we absolutely encourage senators to get involved in committees. I think it's great to have that extra kind of like, additional knowledge of the whole structure with participating in multiple functions. So I'm going to put in the chat a link to our Get Involved page, and that has information about how each group can get involved in either the committee, in the committees. And the Committee on Committees, yes, is a real thing, works on appointing members to our committees. So they have a rolling interest form application, whatever you want to call it. And if you're interested in serving on a committee, we are going to be starting to do some appointments in the next month or so. So please please indicate your interest, and yeah, that's how that works. Other questions?
Amber, this is Cliff. In fact, I just sent you a chat, and this is to you and also to Lori. Has it been established how many in-person meetings we're going to have this year out of the 6 that are scheduled?
Yes, very good question. Yes, so the president has asked us to have all the fall meetings in person, and so those will be the 3 that are in person. The other 3 in the spring where we anticipate to have online. And when I say in person again, I want to clarify that there's a hybrid option. So people on system campuses, people who have to be home with kids or whatever, for some reason, there is a way to participate on Zoom.
Perfect. Thank you.
Michael.
Hi, Amber. Thank you so
Hello.
much for this. And a lot of it's super helpful. I guess just, apropos my point in the chat, I'm also chair of the CLA Assembly. And so in reviewing our constitution, we've been really careful to distinguish between responsibilities that are merely advisory and delegated authorities when it comes to legislative authority and policy. And I think I think there was something about the word advisory reappearing in many places in various slides that I thought made that distinction more confusing than it is in the Constitution. It seems, in my understanding of the Constitution, that the Senate does have specific authorities to create policy, and in addition also has advisory responsibility when it comes to, for instance, budgetary issues. And I think it's important to make sure that we have clarity about what if there's a discussion that is merely advisory to the president and the authority is in the president's hands versus an action that is a legislative authority that is by board policy delegated to the university senate.
Thank you for that. As long as I've worked in Senate office, which is 8 years, 9 years, I can't remember for sure now, Senates have never made policy. Consult, approve, absolutely. But Senates used to make, there used to be Senate-owned policies, but that changed sometime in the 90s. And it may be that the language just hasn't quite caught up with that. I'm not sure, but that's not a thing that we've done, at least recently.
Well, I mean, it is the legal basis for the work of the University Senate because it's in the Constitution, right? So I think this is just something that we need to have collective understanding of, right? That we should be practicing our work and investing in this deliberative work. I mean, there is a serious distinction between advisory and deliberative power, right? Where you take action based on a legislative authority. So it's something that I think it's not helpful to have confusion about or for us to be drifting away from the Constitution in any way.
Thank you. Kathy?
Thank you again for the overview as well. And I would agree with Michael. It would be really helpful to get that language realigned so that we all have common expectations and constitutional documents that are very, very clear about that kind of ambiguity, that don't have that ambiguity. I wanted to ask a follow-up to the question I asked in the chat about when and how decisions that would typically be made through the Senate can get made over the summer. And I didn't mean to imply that you were saying that that would necessarily be made by administration, not by another entity. I see the note that might happen through the SEC, but I would like to know under exactly what criteria would something be deemed urgent or necessary to happen outside of the usual Senate consideration, full Senate consideration.
Sure. Yeah, and I think there aren't clear, like definitive guidelines or criteria, but we really have tried to make it, very few and far between. Like I mentioned in the chat, COVID was a time when some of those decisions just had to be made and like brought to the Senate when we could. There were a couple of times when Title IX was changed on us, and it was very fast. It had to be implemented by August 1st or whatever, and so we had to do some of those things. But we're always, the amount of times we have people come to us at the last minute and say, hey, can we get this through the Senate, at the very end of April, and there aren't Senate meetings left, and we say, no, you gotta wait till the fall. Occasionally we'll call a special meeting, but we try not to, especially over the summer, because faculty aren't on contract. Many students are often, not really around, and so that doesn't seem like a fair process to have things come through when people aren't really around. But then it does lead to sometimes when something just has to be done, and the best way to do it is for the consultative committee to take action that is later reported to the Senate and can be changed if people are really just don't agree. But we do try to avoid that situation as much as possible.
That makes sense that that's an exceptional process. And I understand that there would be reporting after the fact, but is there a communication in advance of that the SEC is going to be considering something so that senators who are paying attention over the summer would have an opportunity to let SEC members know how they feel about it? What is the procedure for that kind of thing happening?
That's a good question. I think, like many things, we don't have like a set procedure for it. I can't remember, honestly, in the past, the examples that I can remember if we did that, but that is a good suggestion, and we can try to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ava.
To that point, it might be possible to add to the bylaws a requirement that in the case that an issue has such urgency and must be considered over the summer, the either faculty consultative committee or Senate consultative committee, whichever one, has a duty to inform the University Senate or whichever Senate is the relevant one that this is afoot, in order to obtain advice and consent effectively, or something like that. But with regard to what Kathy was asking about, senators too can call a summer meeting, and that has been done in recent memory. Back to Michael Gallope's point with regard to delegated authority, one of the areas, which in fact I think you mentioned in your remarks, Amber, where authority is explicitly delegated to faculty. One is curriculum, another is academic freedom and tenure. And so a decision with regard to curriculum that is voted on and passed by the faculty senate is absolute. It cannot be undone. There is no other body that can override that legitimately. But I have a really almost picayune procedural question with regard to the what you're calling the Robert's Rules cheat sheet, that is to say the excerpt on decorum that you've put on the resources page. And Amber, as you know, I've been in the Senate before, and I'm actually going to address this question to Jerry Cohen because he's the Faculty Senate Vice Chair, and maybe the parliamentarian can step in to clarify too. But when we are told to address all remarks through the chair, not address each other, clearly there's a functional purpose to that. But when we speak on the Senate floor, we are actually speaking to our colleagues. So I'm curious, how is this going to be interpreted? So I'm inviting Jerry as Vice Chair of the Faculty Senate to address that. Unmute yourself.
I unmuted myself.
Oh, okay.
Well, I don't think it's a problem to address the presiding off person of the Senate with the idea that you're addressing the entire Senate. It's just a protocol. So, I mean, you definitely are addressing the Senate when you address the chair. So, what you want to avoid is an argument between two senators. Okay, a direct argument. So if everything has to go through the chair, you avoid the situation in which two senators get into an argument that only they are involved in. So I think that's the point.
Yeah.
There are other problems in the rules of decorum that become problematic, but that one I don't think is the major one of But I think there's no problem in realizing that when you address the chair, you are addressing the Senate as a whole.
Yes, this is how we would, our default assumption would be more or less like just what you said. I do worry that it could be used prejudicially.
Gee, tell me how to do that. I have a clue.
Oh, no, I'm not. We'll go on. Next hand, next person.
Penny.
Thanks for the presentation today, much appreciated. So just a quick question, just looking at the rules of decorum, a lot of them are oriented in the printed version of the version posted on the website. Well, they're all oriented to being in person. So, addressing remarks through the chair, there's a point under that if while a member is speaking in a debate, another member wishes to address a question to that member, the member desiring to ask the question should rise and address the chair. So I'm wondering if there is any plan to develop some kind of version of these that is actually appropriate to and takes into account the way that Zoom works as a meeting forum. I could stand up and address the chair, but that's silly. That makes no sense. You wouldn't be able to see me. You'd see my belly button. Like, what's the equivalent? And we do have these ways of interacting on Zoom, but familiar with those, more or less comfortable with those. And it's not clear which one might translate into, like, what's the equivalent on Zoom of getting the attention of the chair while someone is speaking, because you would like to ask the speaker a question. And especially for questions of clarification, I actually think that happens fairly often, but there's just no way to do that I'm aware of with the Zoom format. So is there any plan to kind of figure out how to address that for folks?
Nancy looks like
Yeah. Sorry, the general rules, and there's a lot of the protocol aspects of Robert's rules, including the one that Ava raised earlier, are some of the things I've found most alienating about them when I was first encountering them. And I think some of the things that are so formalized that they can be used in a lot of different directions to there's rules lawyers are nobody's favorite for many reasons, and for among other reasons is that they can deploy the rules to achieve a lot of different ends. One of the things that we dealt with as we moved things onto Zoom was the challenge between having sometimes people who were not recognized to speak wanting to speak at times when that was just like not appropriate by any rules. And then the fact that the rules dictate that there are always, there are a few things people are always allowed to interrupt somebody to ask. Their points of order are one example that are almost always appropriate to raise. And so at one point we did try defaulting to people having to have their audio and or camera, like having to wait to be turned on Zoom. And we ultimately concluded that parliamentary rules prohibited that. We have it set, and we do have technical problems because of this occasionally. We have it set so that all senators can, and actually all attendees typically, can unmute themselves so that you can say, Madam Chair, point of order, or however formal you want to be with it. You can shout out in the middle of something else. That is what, rising to the attention of the chair may be at various times. So we've tried to accommodate the things that are meant to be times when people are allowed to speak without waiting to be recognized.
I appreciate you saying that. And I asked this in a sense that I'm fairly comfortable with Zoom. I teach on Zoom and I do a lot of my meetings on Zoom. And I'm also pretty comfortable breaking into a conversation if I need to, right? I feel that some people aren't. And I'm just wondering if there is some way, Zoom also has other, we have a whole menu of reactions, right? There's the raise hand, there's the clap, there's the little celebratory, whatever that is. I can go like that, see, I can do that. And I'm wondering if there are ways to, this is a suggestion. It might be worth not a lot of time, but a conversation amongst folks who are facilitating this. Is there some way that we could say we're going to have an agreed upon symbol on Zoom so that people who are not like me, who are not comfortable just breaking in and, to the middle of the conversation, might have some way to signal, hey, I have a point of order, or hey, I want to interrupt. Now, maybe that's too much work to monitor, but I don't actually like having to be like, hey, I have a point of order. It strikes me as more disruptive on Zoom than it does in person. You can stand up or like wave your hand and get someone's attention. You have to be really loud and domineering on Zoom to do that. And so I'm just hoping that we can have some, or maybe behind the scenes, you folks have, if you have the bandwidth, to have a conversation about how we might think about using Zoom more effectively that way, so that people aren't penalized or included based on personality.
I like that suggestion. Thank you, Penny. I think we've experimented with other ways to use the different reactions about like the pro and con thing, but the problem with the some of them is they disappear, and so then you lose your place in line and it's confusing. But I think for that purpose, we could definitely look at doing something like that. Any other questions? Katrine?
Hi, everyone. Katrine Vampy. Just as a new Senate member who has been very excited to join the shared governance body, if you'll allow me just a little bit of feedback. When I got the initial email that I could join the Senate, there was a link there to the Constitution that I just pulled up as well, because I was rather confused about the way the authority of the Senate just was presented as advisory. And in the Constitution, there seems to be a very clear separation between actual authority and then advisory responsibilities over other matters. There's a separation in the first paragraph of the Constitution between the matters over which the Senate actually decides and over which it does not decide but advise the president. It seems a little contradictory, and so I'm hoping that a little more clarity could be provided, especially for those of us who are new.
This was frankly my attempt to provide clarity, but it seems that clarity is disputed, and I'm not quite sure where to go with that, but we will continue to think on it. Jerry?
I just wanted to elaborate, and I don't want to cause a lot of trouble, but since she asked the question, so the Senate advises, and if the Senate doesn't like the advice, we always have the option to vote no confidence in the people we advise, which is a pretty extreme end to any discussion, but it can be a rather strong advice if necessary. I don't think we have to use that very often. Mostly the sense of the faculty is important to most of the people we're advising. But it is possible to get in severe disagreement in those cases. So, and it's happened. So anyway, does that help?
Very true. Thank you, Jerry. All right. Any other questions, or also I am going to be sending out this recording and some links. I can send the slides and the links that I've mentioned as well, so that everyone has that information kind of at your fingertips. And we are, of course, available for questions at any time. That's our job, so we're here. Ava.
I would like to just add something actually to Lori Cooper-Stoll, whom I'm Zoom meeting for the first time now, and Amber. Both of you emphasized that the way to get something done in the Senate is to go through committees typically, and it's not the only way, but you gave us an outline and a flow chart of all those committees, and there's a lot of issues on which we might like to have something done. One of the issues for me right now at the beginning of the term is the default to digital for exams and course materials seems ludicrous in the age of AI. And I'd like to write to the Senate Committee on Educational Policy to say this should be taken up. So I'd urge everyone else in the Zoom room to do the same. Obviously, committees can't take up everything that we might want them to, but that's where to get things started. So And good luck to the Senate staff working with one person less than you usually have. I guess one other thought is we're supposed to communicate to our colleagues, that is, as senators, we're supposed to be representatives. And so, of course, that means that when we get the agenda or the docket, ideally we share it with our colleagues in whichever networks we have access to, so that we can actually function as representatives. 1 week is pretty short to do that, but I would also like to urge everybody, try to take it on, so that we not only come informed ourselves about the issues, but we come informed with some perspective from colleagues in our departments, at least, to meetings where we're going to have to discuss and vote.
Definitely agree with both of those points. So thank you. All right, everyone. I think I will call it at that. And thank you all so much for attending. And we look forward to working with all of you and see you in a couple weeks for the first meeting. Many of you I will see in person. Thank you.